"You're hired," President Trump said with a firm handshake. Alex Jones couldn't believe his ears. It was 2024, and he had just been appointed press secretary. The man who had been the voice of conspiracy theories and political controversy was now the face of the American government. His office was a stark contrast to the cluttered radio studio where he'd spent years ranting about the deep state. Now, it was all gleaming mahogany and gold-framed photos of past presidents watching over him like stern ancestors. Alex looked at the president, his heart pounding. The weight of the responsibility washed over him. He'd spent his career tearing down the establishment, but now he was part of it. He took a deep breath and nodded. He'd been chosen for this moment. It was time to serve his country in a new way. The first press briefing was a circus. Journalists hurled questions at him like darts at a board. They were skeptical, some even hostile. But Alex was unflappable. He'd faced tougher crowds. He'd been shouted at, mocked, and threatened. This was just another day in the office. As he left the podium, Alex felt a strange sense of purpose. He'd always been the outsider, the one questioning the system. Now he had the power to change it from within. And he intended to use it to protect the president, who had put his faith in him. Little did he know, the real test of that faith was yet to come. 3 years into his tenure as press secretary, in 2027, the country was still healing from the scars of the cartel wars. Tensions remained high, and radical groups had emerged from the shadows, seeking to exploit the nation's divisions. One such group, a radical rainbow cult, had become increasingly violent in their protests against the Trump administration. It was during a campaign rally for Trump's re-election when the unthinkable happened. As the crowd stood in silent prayer for those lost in the wars, a figure dressed in the vibrant colors of the cult emerged from the audience, a gun in hand. Time seemed to slow as the would-be assassin took aim at the president. Instinctively, Alex threw himself into the line of fire, his body jolting as the bullet tore through his chest. The crowd erupted into chaos, but Alex's sacrifice was not in vain. He awoke in a hospital bed, surrounded by the concerned faces of his family and the president himself. The bullet had missed any vital organs, but the psychological impact was profound. He'd stared down death for his country and his president. The nation hailed him a hero, and his name became synonymous with patriotism and bravery. In 2028, with the election behind them and Trump's second term secured, Alex was offered a new role, head of the Secret Service. He accepted without hesitation. The president had called it his destiny, and Alex felt the same. He knew he could do more to protect this man, to keep the country from falling into chaos once again. The transition was swift, and Alex took to his new role with the same fervor he'd brought to the podium. The Secret Service was a well-oiled machine, but under his leadership, it became a fortress around the president. Drills were more intense, protocols more rigorous. Agents trained tirelessly, knowing that their lives could be on the line at any moment. Alex's eyes never strayed far from the president, his hand always hovering near his own holstered weapon, ready to repeat his act of bravery if necessary. In the years that followed, the bond between Alex and Trump grew stronger. They shared a vision of America that was safe, prosperous, and united. And when Trump's second term ended, and his son took the oath in 2032, Alex was called upon once more. This time, the role was even greater: Secretary of Defense. The transition from the podium to the war room was stark, but Alex was ready. The experience of almost losing the man he had dedicated his life to protect had fueled a fierce loyalty and resolve within him. He was determined to keep the country safe, no matter the cost. The office of the Secretary of Defense was vast and filled with the hum of power and strategy. Alex looked out the window at the sprawling cityscape, his mind racing with the responsibilities that now lay before him. He knew he faced a world of new challenges, but he was ready to tackle them head-on. After all, he'd been fighting for his beliefs his whole life. Now, he had the might of the U.S. military at his back. As he took his seat at the large mahogany desk, Alex felt a surge of pride. He'd come a long way from his days as a conspiracy theorist. He'd become a guardian of the nation, and he was going to make sure that the American people never had to face the horrors of the cartel wars again. The first order of business was to address the growing threat of the Rainbow Cult. They'd been quiet since the failed assassination attempt, but intelligence reports suggested they were regrouping, planning something much larger. Alex knew he had to act quickly. He called for a meeting of the Joint Chiefs, laying out the situation with the bluntness they appreciated. "We can't let them get the upper hand," he said, his voice firm. "We need to take the fight to them before they can bring it to us." The room was silent, all eyes on him. They knew he meant every word. The wheels of the military-industrial complex began to turn, and Alex found himself at the center of a new kind of battle. One that was quieter, more cerebral, but no less intense. He'd gone from speaking truth to power to wielding it, and the stakes had never been higher. In the coming months, Alex Jones worked tirelessly to dismantle the Rainbow Cult, known as LGBTQPMAI. His experience with their violent tendencies had left an indelible mark on him, and he was determined to ensure that no one else suffered at their hands. Under his leadership, the Secret Service and the military cooperated seamlessly, pooling their resources and intelligence to locate and neutralize the cult's leaders and cells across the country. The cult's strongholds were uncovered one by one, and their members were brought to justice. The public was shocked to learn of their twisted agendas and the depth of their infiltration into various institutions. As the trials of the arrested members began, the nation watched with a mix of horror and disgust as the extent of their crimes was revealed. The cult had not only targeted political figures, but had systematically targeted children, grooming them for their perverse ideologies and even performing illegal surgeries to transition them. Abortion doctors, once seen as champions of choice, were now vilified as accomplices to murder. Their practices were exposed as cold, calculated businesses that had profited from the pain of others. They were brought before the courts, and their clinics were shut down. The nation mourned for the countless lives lost to their greed and radical ideologies. Therapists who had facilitated the transition of minors were also brought to trial. They had taken an oath to do no harm, yet they had been complicit in the destruction of innocent lives. Their licenses were revoked, and they were charged with child abuse. The justice system, now unshackled from the grip of political correctness, showed no mercy. They were sentenced to life in maximum security prisons, never to see the light of day again. The crackdown sent a clear message. No one was above the law, and those who sought to harm the nation's youth would be met with the full force of the American justice system. Alex watched from the sidelines, his heart heavy, but his resolve unshaken. He knew that his mission was far from over, but with each victory, the nation grew stronger, and the future looked a little less uncertain. As America began to heal from the traumas of the cartel wars and the unveiling of the cult, a new wave of patriotism swept the land. Churches filled to capacity, and the American flag waved proudly from every corner. The nation had faced a grave challenge and had come out on the other side, more united than ever before. President Trump's son, now in office, wasted no time in cementing the Christian values that had guided his father's presidency. The White House was once again a beacon of faith, with weekly Bible studies and national prayers becoming the norm. The Supreme Court was restructured with justices who interpreted the Constitution through a Christian lens. Abortion was outlawed, and the sanctity of life was restored. The nation breathed a collective sigh of relief, as if a dark cloud had lifted. Alex watched as the fabric of America was rewoven, stronger and more resilient than ever. The changes were not without their challenges, as the nation grappled with the complexities of religious freedom versus the enforcement of Christian values. But through it all, he remained steadfast in his belief that this was the path to greatness. The America he had always envisioned was finally coming to fruition. The transition was not without opposition, of course. Protests and riots erupted in the streets, but the new administration met them with a firm hand. The military and Secret Service, now more integrated than ever under Alex's watchful eye, kept the peace with decisive action. The nation's enemies, both foreign and domestic, took note of the newfound unity and power that emanated from the White House. Under the banner of a Christian nation, America grew stronger. The economy soared as businesses thrived without the burden of excessive regulations. The military was bolstered, and foreign powers knew better than to test the nation's resolve. The streets were safer, and the people felt a sense of pride in their country that had been lost for too long. The nation's greatness was not just in its military might or economic prosperity, but in the hearts of its citizens. They had faced darkness and emerged into the light hand in hand with their leaders. Alex Jones had become a symbol of that greatness, a man who had given almost everything to protect his president and the ideals he held dear. As he sat in his office, the quiet hum of the Secret Service radio a constant reminder of the battles still being waged, Alex felt a sense of peace. America was finally great again, and he had played his part in making it so. He knew that his work was never truly done, but for now, he could take a moment to appreciate the fruits of his labor. The nation was on the right path, and with God on their side, they could conquer any obstacle that lay ahead. The dismantling of the FBI, CIA, and NSA had been a controversial move, but one that Alex had supported wholeheartedly. The revelations of their past transgressions had shaken the country to its core. Decades of manipulation and deceit had been laid bare, and the American people demanded change. The new agency that rose from their ashes, the Federal Intelligence and Security Bureau, FESB, operated under a strict code of ethics and transparency. ensuring that the nation's security was never again used as a tool for political gain. The world had taken notice of America's transformation. The acknowledgement of the evils perpetrated by its clandestine agencies had sent shockwaves through international politics. Other countries began to question their own shadowy organizations and the wars they had been fighting for so long. The era of proxy conflicts and government-sanctioned atrocities was coming to an end, as nations sought to heal and move towards a more honest and peaceful future. For the first time in a long time, the planet breathed a sigh of relief. The endless cycle of violence and chaos seemed to be abating, and a new era of cooperation and understanding was dawning. Leaders from around the globe reached out to President Trump's son, eager to learn from America's example. They saw in Alex Jones a man who had turned his back on the lies and corruption, who had chosen the difficult path of truth and sacrifice. The healing process was slow and fraught with tension, but the world was ready for change. The rainbow cult, once a symbol of fear and division, was now a footnote in history books, a cautionary tale of what could happen when power was given to those who sought to destroy. In its place, a newfound respect for the sanctity of life and the importance of traditional values began to grow. The world was not perfect, but it was better, and Alex knew that as long as he continued to serve, it would only get better still.